We want to visit now revisit a story from last night about the biggest beef feedlot farm in New Zealand. For those of you who weren't with us last night, feedlot farming is American-style intensive grain-fed beef farming. Cattle bunched together for months at a time at the end of their lives. They've been on grain previously so they can be fattened up faster than they otherwise would be. Sorry, they've been on grass previously than they otherwise would be if they stayed on grass. The biggest one in the country by far is the Ansco-owned five-star beef farm in Ashburton, which has consent to farm 19,000 cattle on less than 1 square kilometre. The farm is not new, it's been there since 1991. But we're talking about it now because it represents a style of farming that some groups are worried is going to become more common in New Zealand. Last night we heard from animal welfare group SAFE and from Fish and Game, who are both asking the Environment Minister David Parker to ban feedlot farming before it becomes commonplace because of animal welfare and, in the Minister's case, environmental concerns. David Parker is on the line now, I think. Thanks for being with us, Minister, and thank you for waiting 3 or 4 minutes to get on air.
No problem at all.
Nice to have you with us. What do you make of the sort of feedlot farming we saw on Checkpoint last night?
Well, I haven't seen in person the one near Ashburton, but I have seen in person a number of smaller but nonetheless problematic feedlots in the Hawke's Bay region. I described them a couple of years ago as battery beef lots, as they really do look like the beef equivalent of chicken. And I have a problem with the environmental effects of some of them. At least some of them, and I've been in discussions with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council about those.
So what is your position as Minister about controls in terms of the environmental impact of this kind of intensive beef farming?
Well, some of the ones that I've seen, and I've seen photos of them, and indeed I've seen them after rain events when there's puddles everywhere, there's not a blade of grass to be seen. And there's no doubt that when you have a rain event, the livestock effluent and the nutrient from the food residues has only one place to go, and that's into rivers, streams, or two places. The alternative is into the aquifer. And I struggle to see how some of them are legal. I know that there's some controversy in the Hawke's Bay recently about that with some other news that I've seen, and I know that the Regional Council have themselves written to me asking for some national rules that apply to beef lots throughout the land. They think that's the way to go.
The fact is the horse has bolted to a certain extent. This Ansco farm has been there since 1991.
Yeah, well, I'm not really in a position to comment on the Ansco one. I do think that if you've got these intensive forms of farming with lots of nutrient, that you actually need to be collecting the effluent rather than letting it run into the rivers and aquifers. I'm not really qualified to comment on the animal welfare issues, which I accept are a concern for some people. But in respect of the effects on rivers, regional councils have had the full array of tools since the Resource Management Act was passed back in 1991 to actually deal with these issues. Sadly, the rules in some areas are not adequate. I'm not saying that's true in respect of Ashburton, by the way, I just don't know.
No, and nor do we. And in fact, we're going to talk to Ansco and in fact visit the facility and talk to them about what they are doing with the runoff, with the effluent, with the shit, for want of a better word. The Ministry of the Environment, our land report from April, has once again listed the issues here. Agricultural intensification, increased erosion, degradation of soil and water quality, loss of soil biodiversity, especially true for intensive farming areas on flat to rolling lands. It says intensification
leads
to soil quality, erosion.
Soil compaction.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So why are we even having this discussion now? Either this sort of farming is acceptable with various caveats around it in terms of nutrient and runoff disposal, or it is not acceptable at all. In other words, isn't it time for some architecture, some clarity around the terms under which this farming can take place?
Yes, it is. I think it's a great sadness that people seem to accept that the criminal laws need to be enforced and various other laws, but some people seem to think that environmental laws are nice to have rather than laws that should be adhered to. And I certainly think that some of these beef feedlot environmental practices are poor. I struggle to see how they're legal. I don't think it's fair for regional councils to say, over to you, central government, when they've had the authority to deal with this. Nonetheless, that is the reality, and as a consequence, we are left with having to deal with it, and I will.
And how will you?
We have it in a work program to develop some national guidance that could we haven't taken a final decision as to the form of it, but the choices include having a national environment standard, which is effectively a rule imposed from on high that all regional councils have to apply, and it could be applied at a farm level through compulsory farm environment plans that have to apply the national environment standard. That would be one way you could do it.
What would be another way of doing it, particularly in the context of operations that are up and running and have been, in this case, for 27 years?
Well, again, I won't comment on that one because I actually don't know that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the Hawke's Bay ones I have seen, I'm happy to say, are environmentally unsound. And, I published photos in the lead up to the election.
Sorry, can I just interrupt there because the line was a bit muffled? You're saying they are environmentally unsound? Some
of those in the Hawke's Bay undoubtedly are, in my view, and I've published photos on that in the lead up to the election.
So why are they still operating?
Well, they haven't been properly policed by the regional councils, and that means that central government has to step in with some national direction to bind regional councils, and we intend to do that.
Okay. And when do you think that will be done by?
I think our draft legal instrument will be promulgated for consultation by the first quarter of next year. It's already on our work plan, and as I say, there has been a change in the political makeup of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. I think the area had a bit of a fright as a consequence of the Havelock North water scare. Although it was disconnected from this sort of thing, it sort of raised public consciousness of the issue. And I think the Regional Council themselves know that more needs to be done, and they want central government assistance to do it. And
you're saying the central government is going to provide that assistance, and potentially within the next 12 months or so?
Yes.
David Parker, will you go and visit that ANZCO farm in Ashburton?
Well, if I don't, my officials will. But there's a responsible regional council down there, Environment Canterbury, and they've had their problems in the distant past, but they've been a pretty well run regional council in recent years. So I would be surprised if it's not already under some system of management through the regional council.
David Parker, Environment Minister, joining us live. Thank you very much indeed. An overwhelming amount of feedback from you on this last night. We asked ANZCO itself, which owns the five-star beef farm, feedlot farm in Ashburton, for an interview again today. We really do want to hear from them. Once again, they declined, so we contacted the former general manager of the farm. He said he was happy to be interviewed, but requested permission from ANZCO. ANZCO wouldn't give him permission to speak to us, but said a spokesperson would be available to talk to us on Thursday. Some people are saying, well, where's the ANZCO side of the story? And aren't ANZCO policing all of these kinds of things? We absolutely want to talk to ANZCO about this, and we are hoping to do so on Thursday, and we have a promise that that will indeed happen.